Picture the diplomatic world like a giant high school cafeteria. For decades, Palestine sat at the table with only a handful of sympathetic friends, mostly countries outside the cool kids' Western clique. But suddenly, that table is filling up, and not with fringe players either. We're talking heavyweights: the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Portugal, and yes, France, Belgium, and Luxembourg too. Even Malta and Monaco, tiny but symbolically loud, slid their trays over and said, "We're in." That's not just a polite gesture, that's a tectonic shift. Here's the math. Out of 193 UN member states, 156 now officially recognize Palestine. That's over 3/4 of the world. Imagine trying to argue this isn't real when 75% of your peers are waving flags and opening embassies. It's like denying climate change while your neighbor's lawn is literally on fire. Why now? 3 big reasons. First, humanitarian crisis overload. The devastation in Gaza and the West Bank, amplified by global media, made inaction politically toxic. Politicians who used to dodge the question are now getting grilled by their own voters. Why haven't you recognized Palestine yet? Second, international fatigue. The peace process has been stuck in quicksand for decades, and people are done waiting for a Hollywood ending that never comes. Recognition feels like action. Third, domestic politics. Leaders in Europe, Latin America, and Asia are realizing that standing with Palestine scores big with younger, more vocal voters who dominate online discourse. So the wave isn't just symbolic, it's strategic. Every new recognition builds momentum, making it harder for the holdouts to justify their silence. It's peer pressure, but instead of buying skinny jeans in 2005, you're buying embassies in Ramallah in 2025. But hey, before we get too swept up in the numbers game, let's ask a brutal question. What even counts as a state? Because recognition without criteria is like passing someone into the Olympics because they can juggle. Let's check the rule book. All right, so countries are lining up like it's Black Friday at a Costco. But here's the million-dollar question. What actually makes a state? You don't just slap state on your Instagram bio and boom, sovereignty. International law actually has a cheat sheet, the Montevideo Convention of 1933. According to this old but still gold framework, a proper state needs 4 things. 1, a permanent population. 2, a defined territory. 3, a functioning government. And 4, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. Easy checklist, right? Well, kind of. Let's see how Palestine measures up. Population? Absolutely. Millions of people live in Gaza, the West Bank, and diaspora communities worldwide. No argument there. Defined territory. That's where things get messy. The 1967 borders are the internationally recognized ideal, but on the ground, you've got settlements, military zones, and contested areas that make drawing a clean map about as simple as untangling Christmas lights in July. Functioning government? The Palestinian Authority covers parts of the West Bank, while Hamas controls Gaza. Translation, there's governance, but it's fractured, inconsistent, and often paralyzed by internal politics. Finally, international relations? That's a solid yes. Palestinian representatives already act like diplomats, and now with more recognitions pouring in, they're opening doors faster than a Starbucks on Monday morning. So where does that leave us? Recognition is partly legal, partly political, and partly symbolic. Some states say, sure, you meet enough of the criteria, and besides, we want to be on the right side of history. Others argue, nope, until there's unified leadership and clear borders, it's premature. Here's the kicker. International law isn't a math exam. There's no automatic pass or fail. Recognition is subjective, shaped by politics, morality, and sometimes plain old alliances. In practice, if enough countries treat you as a state, you basically are one, even if the paperwork's still messy. So okay, the criteria debate is interesting, but let's cut to the chase. What actually changes practically when a country recognizes Palestine? Spoiler, it's more than just a new flag emoji on Twitter. Recognition isn't just a fancy press release with flags in the background. It's a backstage pass into the VIP lounge of international politics. When one country recognizes another, a whole cascade of practical effects kicks in. Think of it like getting verified on social media. Suddenly, people take you more seriously, and you get access to rooms you couldn't enter before. Step 1. Embassies and ambassadors. Recognition usually leads to official diplomatic missions. That means Palestinian ambassadors no longer sit at the junior table with observer status. They're now legitimate diplomats, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, and signing agreements with the same authority as any other state's envoy. Step 2. Treaties. Recognition opens the door for bilateral deals on trade, aid, security cooperation, health, education, you name it. Countries can now ink agreements with Palestine as a peer, not just as a humanitarian project. That shift matters because it strengthens institutions and reinforces the perception of Palestine as a functioning state. Step 4. International bodies. Recognition doesn't automatically get Palestine a full seat at the UN Security Council, thanks veto powers, but it does give more muscle in places like the ICC, the World Health Organization, and other global agencies. The more states recognize Palestine, the harder it becomes for international courts and forums to brush aside their complaints. War crimes, displacement, refugee rights all get a louder legal megaphone. Step 4. Symbolism with teeth. When passports, stamps, and official documents say State of Palestine and other countries accept them, it normalizes the idea in daily interactions. It's like practice reality. Each recognition makes the abstract concept of Palestinian statehood feel more concrete until eventually it just is. So no, it's not just another headline. Recognition reshapes the playing field in ways both symbolic and tangible. But of course, not everyone's cheering. For every handshake and embassy ribbon, there's pushback, boycotts, and backlash. So who's digging their heels in? And why? If recognition were a concert, the front rows are packed, the crowd is roaring, but a few big-name VIPs are still standing at the back with crossed arms. Chief among them, Israel and the United States. Their position is simple, blunt, and loud. Recognizing Palestine without a negotiated settlement is like awarding a medal before the race is over. They argue it undermines peace talks, emboldens hardliners, and rewards what they call terrorist violence. Washington has even leaned on allies not to follow Europe's lead, warning that premature recognition could destabilize an already volatile region. Then you've got other holdouts. Germany, Italy, Japan, and a handful of strategically cautious nations. Their reasoning is a little more diplomatic. Some say, we're not opposed forever, just not right now. Translation, they're hedging bets. Recognition might look morally righteous, but geopolitics is about alliances, arms deals, and trade routes. Rocking the boat with Israel or with the U.S. isn't a cost every leader wants to pay. And let's not forget domestic politics. In countries where pro-Israel lobbies wield influence or where voters are sharply divided, recognition can be a political grenade. Leaders ask themselves, is the photo op worth the backlash? Often the answer is no, at least for now. But here's the irony. While these nations drag their feet, the momentum makes their silence louder. The more countries sign on, the more not yet starts to sound like never. And that puts leaders in an awkward spot with both their allies and their citizens. So resistance isn't about denying Palestine's existence per se. It's about timing, leverage, and political calculus. But every time another flag joins the recognition club, the fence-sitters look less like cautious diplomats and more like the last kids at the school dance refusing to leave the bleachers. And that leads us to the million-dollar question. How does all this recognition, plus resistance, reshape the holy grail of Middle East diplomacy, the two-state solution? For decades, the phrase two-state solution has been tossed around in diplomatic circles like a frisbee at a family picnic. Everyone talks about it, but no one ever actually catches it. Recognition of Palestine, however, throws some real weight behind that frisbee. Each new country that says, yes, we recognize Palestine, is essentially declaring, we believe two states should exist side by side, period. It's not just a policy preference, it's a blueprint. On paper, this sounds like a win for diplomacy. Recognition builds the scaffolding for a two-state outcome, making it harder to dismiss Palestinian claims as hypothetical. The message to Israel is clear. The world is no longer treating Palestine as a footnote. The message to Palestinians is, the dream isn't dead, we're putting bricks on the foundation. But here's the catch. Recognition is not the same as resolution. The borders are still fuzzy, governance is divided, and security arrangements remain a minefield. You can recognize a house, sure, but if the plumbing leaks, the walls crack, and two different families are fighting over the master bedroom, you don't have a home, you have a lawsuit waiting to happen. And then there's the paradox. Recognitions can both pressure and paralyze. Pressure because Israel feels cornered as more allies tilt toward Palestinian legitimacy. Paralyzed because Israel might dig in harder, refusing to negotiate under perceived external coercion. It's diplomacy's version of trying to push a donkey uphill. It either climbs or it plants all four hooves and refuses to budge. Still, the symbolism matters. Recognition doesn't guarantee peace, but it cements the idea that a one-state, status quo forever reality isn't acceptable. It's the world saying, we want a two-state future, even if we're stuck in a zero-progress present. But let's zoom out of policy papers for a second. How do the people who actually live under this reality, Palestinians themselves, feel about this wave of recognition? Spoiler, it's not all champagne and fireworks. When news broke that countries like the UK, Canada, and France had formally recognized Palestine, streets in Ramallah lit up with celebration. Flags waved, fireworks cracked, and for a brief moment, people felt like the world was finally listening. Imagine waiting decades for your name to be called at roll call, then suddenly half the classroom shouts it at once. For many Palestinians, recognition equals validation. It says, we exist, we matter, and we're not invisible anymore. But hold the confetti, because not everyone's convinced this is the miracle ticket. Alongside joy, there's anxiety. Some worry that international recognition might provoke harsher measures from Israel, tightened checkpoints, more settlement activity, or military pushback. After all, when you change the rules of the game, the referee doesn't always stay neutral. Then there's skepticism, and it runs deep. Ordinary Palestinians ask, okay, great, 156 countries recognize us, but does that change my daily commute through checkpoints? Does it keep the electricity on longer than 6 hours? Does it mean my cousin can travel freely without permits? Recognition in international forums doesn't automatically translate into smoother realities on the ground. It's like getting a blue checkmark online. You're official, but your Wi-Fi still drops during video calls. And don't forget the internal politics. With the Palestinian Authority running the West Bank and Hamas controlling Gaza, many residents worry recognition might amplify divisions rather than bridge them. Will the world's applause push leaders to unify, or will it harden rivalries? The answer isn't clear. Still, even the skeptics admit one thing: momentum is powerful. Each recognition chips away at decades of diplomatic stagnation. Even if life doesn't change overnight, the psychological boost, knowing the world sees you as more than a perpetual disputed territory, is a win in itself. But symbolism only goes so far. The next battlefield isn't in the streets of Ramallah, it's in courtrooms, treaties, and international agencies. Recognition gives Palestine new tools in global law. The question is, how sharp are they?
Recognition isn't just about headlines or hashtags. It's about leverage in the slow, grinding machinery of international law. Think of it like upgrading your gym membership. Before recognition, Palestine was stuck on the basic package. They could show up, but no access to the heavy equipment. With more states recognizing them,
Suddenly, they're swiping the premium card. Full rights to courts, treaties, and forums where real muscle gets flexed. First up, the International Criminal Court. Recognition strengthens Palestine's ability to file complaints against alleged war crimes or violations of international law. When 156 countries say this is a state, it becomes harder for global institutions to dismiss cases as coming from a non-entity. Suddenly, documents stamped State of Palestine carry more legal weight than a strongly worded UN speech. Next, treaties and agreements. Recognition unlocks the door to bilateral deals, trade, security cooperation, scientific exchanges. Think health partnerships with Europe, agricultural aid from Latin America, or student exchange programs in Asia. It's the difference between being treated as a charity case versus being seen as a peer. Then, there's the UN game. While full membership still gets blocked by Security Council vetoes, read the US, recognition gives Palestine stronger standing in the General Assembly and UN agencies. Every new vote in their favor chips away at Israel's diplomatic insulation. More recognitions equals louder megaphone in the world's biggest political theater. But perhaps the most underrated impact is the normalization of documentation. Recognized passports, postal stamps, and diplomatic visas all make daily interactions easier. Recognition doesn't bulldoze checkpoints, but it does erode excuses. If airlines, universities, and financial institutions start treating Palestinian documents as legitimate, life shifts. Quietly, but tangibly. Still, let's pump the brakes. Recognition doesn't flip a magic switch. It has teeth, yes, but not fangs. So what are the limits of this new status? And where does recognition hit a wall? All right, let's get real. Recognition sounds powerful. Flags waving, ambassadors smiling, treaties signed. But let's not kid ourselves. It's not a magic wand that turns checkpoints into open roads or contested borders into peaceful parks. Recognition has limits, and they're pretty stubborn. First, territory control. Yes, countries say they recognize Palestine within the 1967 borders, but on the ground, Israel still controls major chunks of the West Bank, Gaza is blockaded, and settlements keep expanding. Recognition doesn't come with bulldozers to clear those obstacles. It's like being handed the deed to a house you can't actually get inside. Second, governance. The Palestinian Authority runs parts of the West Bank, Hamas controls Gaza, and the two don't exactly share kumbaya circles. Recognition doesn't suddenly unite divided leadership or resolve who's in charge. You can declare a state all you want, but if you half your territory is run by your political rival, functioning government is more theory than practice. Third, international roadblocks. Full UN membership? Forget it for now. The U.S. still has a veto in the Security Council and has made it crystal clear it won't allow Palestine's seat to be upgraded. Recognition by 156 states sounds massive, but one veto trumps the whole choir. And finally, daily life. Recognition doesn't instantly improve electricity access, healthcare, or freedom of movement. Palestinians celebrating recognition today might still face the same checkpoint tomorrow. It's symbolic fuel for long-term diplomacy, not a short-term cure. So yes, recognition matters, but let's not oversell it. It gives Palestine legitimacy, legal tools, and international clout. But until borders shift, governments reconcile, and vetoes crumble, recognition alone is like buying the concert ticket without fixing the broken speaker system. The music still sounds off. But here's the twist. Even if recognition doesn't solve everything, it does ripple outward, because every new flag on Palestine's side reshapes global alliances, and the geopolitical map is looking a lot different than it did just a year ago. Recognition isn't just a diplomatic pat on the back. It's a tectonic shift in global politics. Every time a new country plants its flag in the "yes, Palestine is a state" camp, it tilts the geopolitical balance a little more. And now, with 156 recognitions, the seesaw is looking very lopsided. First, let's talk about Israel. For decades, it's leaned on a safety net of strong allies, the US, Germany, and a handful of others, to shield it diplomatically.
But now, as Britain, France, and Canada cross over, Israel faces the uncomfortable reality that its traditional allies are no longer all in. Imagine your closest friends suddenly RSVPing to your rival's wedding. That stings. Second, the Middle East bloc. Arab and Muslim-majority countries already recognize Palestine, but now, with Europe and even some Western allies on board, that recognition gains heft. It's no longer a regional cause, it's a global one. That adds leverage in peace talks, but also fuels frustration in Israel, which sees the walls closing in. Third, global South solidarity. Latin America and Africa have long recognized Palestine, but now they look vindicated. For years, their recognition was dismissed as symbolic. Today, they can point at Europe and say, "Told you so." That strengthens their diplomatic standing in other negotiations, from trade to climate. And finally, the big picture rivalry. Recognition feeds into the wider struggle between the West's old guard, led by the US, and an emerging multipolar world. Countries like China and Russia happily back Palestine as a way to undermine US influence. Every recognition is not just about Palestine, it's also a chess move in a global power game. Bottom line, recognition isn't just a flag in Ramallah, it's a fault line in 21st century geopolitics. So after all this shifting, cheering, resisting, and recalculating, where does it actually go from here? Let's look into the crystal ball and map out what might come next. So here we are, 156 recognitions down, momentum building, and the world buzzing. But where does this go from here? The truth is, the future has multiple storylines, and which one plays out depends on politics, pressure, and maybe a dash of luck. Scenario 1, the domino effect. More countries follow the UK, France, and Canada's lead until recognition becomes nearly universal. That would isolate the holdouts, mainly the US and Israel, and crank up the diplomatic heat. Imagine walking into the UN cafeteria and realizing you and one buddy are the only two who didn't sign the yearbook. Awkward. Scenario 2. Conditional recognition grows teeth. Some countries are already tying their recognition to reforms, like demanding Palestinian leadership unify, curb corruption, or ensure Gaza and the West Bank get on the same political page. If those conditions are met, recognition could turn into real aid, trade, and rebuilding. If not, it risks being another symbolic gesture that fizzles out. And finally, the wild card, real negotiations. If momentum and pressure keep mounting, both sides might be forced back to the table. Recognition alone won't sign peace treaties, but it might shove leaders toward dialogue. So the road ahead, messy, uncertain, but undeniably different. Recognition hasn't solved the conflict, but it's redefined the playing field. Palestine is no longer a question mark in global politics. It's an exclamation mark waiting for the next chapter. And here's where you come in. Do you think recognition is a turning point, or just another empty headline? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. Smash that like if you want the world to pay attention to the people behind the politics, and hit subscribe because at Global Pulse News,